Perfect. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk here today. As I said, sadly, Katrina's on holiday currently, which is obviously sad for me, but great for her. But I just wanted to acknowledge that our work has been equal on this little project, as she's not able to be here in person to present. We have embedded a QR code on each of the pages that links you to us both talking you through this content. So if you're not watching this talk live, feel free to stop listening to me, and then you can listen to us both via the QR codes. But as you're listening to us live, please do listen to me. At the Open University, or OU, the role of the learning designing process is a bespoke experience based on module team needs. We do have a core offer, and it is this that we mold to meet those bespoke needs. We know that most students drop out between reservation and the first fee liability point, or FLP, and then between 100% FLP and completion. So our work in the learning design, or LD team, is partly focused around how to design to support retention. We don't sadly have the scope to talk about everything that we do within this talk due to the time restraints. However, we're going to focus on 3 areas to offer an overview of what we do here. So these are number 1, student voice and how we use it in module presentation to support students. Number 2, designing material through the lens of Iceberg, and we're going to specifically focus on one area of that model. And then number 3, about balancing student workload, what that means and how we approach it with teams. So retention in distance and open education courses have higher levels of withdrawals than face-to-face universities. And this is taken from a 2022 article titled "Why Do Open and Distance Education Students Drop Out? Views from Various Stakeholders." So therefore, when we at the OU consider retention, it is through this lens that we must start our journey. Analysis on student outcomes at the OU shows that early student engagement with our virtual learning environment, or VLE, leads directly to better outcomes for the students. So this is something that we try to build into that student journey. Supporting module teams to use real-time student feedback, or RTSF, is one way which the LD team help to support student success and retention. As a team, we produce case studies, and you can see a tiny picture of one of them on the screen. And this helps to create an evidence bank for our real-time student feedback input for module teams to reflect on. In brief, RTSF is a method of capturing more about students' experience of studying a module whilst they're studying it. And it usually takes the form of kind of short questionnaires, which are made up of specific action-focused questions, and they're embedded within the VLE and made accessible to students at particular points during their study of a module. We support module teams, and by that I mean the teams of academic staff who create modules and manage them whilst they're being studied, to use this tool at points where they think it would be students may need additional support. So for example, it might be embedded just before a tricky assignment or task to gather feedback on how ready students feel and what actions might be needed to support them. Module teams can then take immediate action in response to this feedback in order to support student success, improving hopefully the experience for students who are currently studying that module. The action taken could be anything from signposting back to key module materials or putting on additional tutorials for topics that have been raised in that feedback. So the Iceberg principles followed a report published by colleagues at the OU, and again you can see a tiny picture of it on this screen. It's from this that our approach to design has evolved, and we don't have time to explore each element today, although we thought for the benefit of contextualizing the model as a whole, we felt it would be useful to show you the meaning of the acronym. Each area allows the LD to support important design considerations, and there is work currently going on to kind of review and update this model within the OU team. So today I am going to be focusing on the balanced aspect, and what I'm going to be exhaustive list of ways in which learning design at the OU approaches this concept of balanced. So number one, we try to ensure that workload in each week is manageable for students, and we'll be touching a little bit more about workload a little bit later in this talk. Number two, we try to keep the workload distribution even across the student's journey, and that means all of the elements that make up that learning experience. We also try to build in effective study skills development, like the planning and organizational skills, and consider how these are scaffolded up to assessment points. Oh, and number four, we ensure that students know on a week-by-week basis exactly what they're expected to do so that they can kind of plan their time effectively. So the focus on workload at the OU has its roots in a project which ran between 2014 and 2015, and the project reviewed several modules and created various recommendations, and we've put a few of those on the screen. So it was found that there has been that there was a link between high workload and low completion rates. So an increase of weekly workload by an extra hour was also found to lead to a reduction in student completion rates, and it was also found that unevenly distributed workloads led to lower completion rates as well. So in response to this, the university set a kind of university-wide set of workload norms, and these were generated from a review of workload across the HE sector and including QAA guidelines. And these norms are followed by module teams to ensure that student workload is consistent across faculties, disciplines, and study levels. Workload can be calculated and measured against these norms by looking at the word count of content and analyzing it against a number of set reading speeds. Other non-written or more complex content, such as video or audio, tables, images, also have separate norms associated with them. So these norms are now embedded in the module design and production process. And from a learning design perspective, this means that we are able to support teams to effectively manage the average weekly work. This workload is evenly distributed, and that's quite important. There is some flexibility to ensure that workload isn't kind of rigidly the same every week, because it might not be appropriate. So we try not to exceed kind of 2 hours above or below the norms. One of the main ways that we support module teams with workload is by using a tool that's referred to currently as the LD tool, and it has a few applications, but I only have time to talk about one of those applications today, and that's how we can help module teams to kind of measure and visualize the workload across their module content. So the tool itself uses the workload norms to help review module content and get a clear breakdown of timings, and this might be on a week-by-week basis or on a topic or activity level. We can map the different timings of the written and visual content, as well as the division of activity types. And just on that, we follow the OU activity type framework for this, and you can visit our blog, which you'll see a link to at the end, and I'll point that out, and feel free to kind of read that and other articles as well whilst you're there. Go back to the talk though. So we can map constructive alignment between learning outcomes and assessments, and there's also a feature to visualize frameworks and VLE tools used by students, so things like the employability framework, for example. And finally, the tool is useful for visualizing the mapping, so it creates graphs and charts and provides a means for exporting said data. The tool creates a map of that weekly workload within the content that's been mapped, and this output allows us to have an informed discussion with module teams about the patterns present in that version of the course material that's gone through that process. So as a result, it allows us to have kind of quite focused conversations, and these can include but are not limited to things such as weeks where workload exceeds the suggested norms, large blocks of unbroken assimilative teaching, or uneven balances within the activity types of the material. So how do we actually work with the module teams to review the workload? So we do this in 3 different steps, and it depends on kind of where we're at with that process as to what our work and sort of role is. So I'm going to break it down for you into those 3 steps. So the first part is the planning. So during the planning stage, our role is to help the team identify when the best time to map their content is, and you need a well-formed kind of draft which includes like activities and ideas of what the videos or visuals will be in order to map effectively. Teams also need to have time to adjust content based on their findings, so it needs to sit at an appropriate moment. Once we've done that planning, there's the actual mapping process. So during the mapping process, we help the initial stages of the mapping, and we also train teams to use that LD tool. So where appropriate, we might help with the additional functions of the tool as well. So things like reviewing interactions with those additional frameworks and the constructive alignment sections of the LD tool as well. And the final stage is reflection. So once the mapping has been completed, we compile a report which includes the visualizations and the outputs with design recommendations, and we work with the module team to reflect on these outcomes and implement any recommendations. So in a nutshell, one element of the role of the LD in relation to student success and retention is to support module teams with design decisions around workload. And we hope we've given you a little insight into how we attempt to do this at the OU. So thank you for listening to this talk, which obviously is about the role of learning design at the Open University in supporting student retention and success. I look forward to any questions that you might have, and as promised, unlike any of the other QR codes in my talk, this one will take you directly to our blog post. So if you wish to explore that at your leisure, you can do so. And that is my talk. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Paul. If any, I see a hand has just gone up from Dawn. Let me just give you permission to speak, Dawn. Dawn, have you taken your hand down? I think it's gone. If anyone does have a question for Paul, if you could just raise your hand quickly. We do have time for 1 question. Okay, I do have 1 question, if that's all right, Paul. There were loads of different things there, but one thing that kind of just jumped out to me, kind of towards the kind of the start of your presentation, was when you were talking about regularly surveying your students. And I was just wondering, it's do you kind of, what are the response rates like with regards to surveying your students? Do you find that they stay consistent, or do they tail off?
I think so with that tool, the real-time student feedback, there's opportunity to place it at more than 1 occasion during the student journey as well. So what we found with response rates, it tends to depend on a couple of things. So one of the things that can really help with the response rate is kind of, for want of a better phrase, advertising from the module team, so they can kind of talk to the students to contextualize why they're being asked to do this thing and kind of help them to hopefully see that it's a supportive process. But in terms of typical response rates, it kind of somewhere between 25 up to 50% would be a really excellent response rate. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today, Paul. We're going to take a short break now, but I think there may be some questions in the chat. If you had a few minutes, if you could just take a look. If you do have to dash off, just let us know and we can kind of we can tackle those for you. But thank you so much. That was a really great presentation, and I love the festive theme on the background there. It's great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye.